Friday in Islamabad began with the usual calm, families heading to mosques, the city's green spaces alive with routine. The air was filled with a sense of anticipation, as people looked forward to a day of reflection and togetherness. Children clung to their parents, elders exchanged warm greetings, and the city seemed to move in harmony with the rhythm of prayer. In a prominent Shia mosque, worshippers gathered for prayers, seeking peace and connection. The mosque's halls echoed with a soft murmur of recitation, and the faithful found comfort in the familiar rituals that had brought them together for generations. The mosque was a sanctuary, a place where the community felt safe and united. Here, differences faded away, replaced by a shared sense of belonging and hope. For many, it was a weekly anchor, a moment to pause, reflect, and reconnect with both faith and neighbors. No one inside could have imagined the horror about to unfold. The faces in prayer were serene, untouched by any hint of fear or suspicion. The sanctity of this sacred space was about to be violated in the most brutal way. The walls that had witnessed countless prayers were soon to bear witness to unimaginable tragedy. As prayers continued, worshippers were completely absorbed in their faith, unaware of the looming threat. The world outside faded away, replaced by the comfort of devotion and the gentle cadence of prayer. The idea of an attack in such a protected, holy environment was unthinkable. Security was present, but no one believed it would ever be truly needed within these walls. The community believed they were safe from the hatred that sometimes festered outside. Within the mosque there was trust, a belief that faith could shield them from the world's darkness. Generations mingled freely, from playful children to wise elders, all united by a sense of purpose and peace. The mosque was more than a place of worship, it was the heart of the community. But the tranquility was fragile. Beneath the surface, the world's tensions sometimes threatened to intrude, but hope always seemed to prevail. Until now. The attack, when it came, was not just an assault on a building or a group of people. It shattered the illusion of safety that had been so carefully built over years. It was an attack on the very idea of peace and religious freedom, targeting the community at its most vulnerable. The shockwaves would be felt far beyond these walls, echoing through the city and the nation. The peaceful scene of worship was about to be transformed into chaos and tragedy, forever marking this day in the city's memory. What began as a day of unity and devotion would end as a somber reminder of the fragility of peace. The first sign of disaster was the sharp cracking sound of gunfire outside the mosque. It shattered the quiet of the night, echoing off the ancient walls and sending a chill through everyone inside. For a brief moment, confusion reigned as people tried to make sense of the sudden violence. Panic swept through the prayer hall as worshippers realized this was no ordinary noise. The sacred space, filled with prayers and hope, was instantly transformed into a place of fear. People clung to each other, eyes wide with terror, as the reality of the attack set in. A suicide bomber forced his way into the crowded hall, turning a moment of devotion into terror. The intruder's presence was a nightmare come to life. And in those seconds, time seemed to slow as everyone realized the danger they faced. For a split second, disbelief froze the crowd, then horror set in. The shock was overwhelming, and many could barely move or speak, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. The attacker, driven by hate, detonated his explosives among men, women, and children. In an instant, the lives of dozens were changed forever, and the echoes of the blast would haunt survivors for years to come. The blast was deafening, shattering windows and lives in an instant. The force of the explosion sent debris flying, tearing through the sacred hall and leaving devastation in its wake. Smoke, dust, and screams filled the air as the beautiful mosque was reduced to chaos. The cries of the wounded and the desperate calls for help echoed through the ruined building, mingling with the acrid smell of smoke. Survivors found themselves in darkness, stumbling over debris and bodies, desperate to find loved ones. The once familiar space was now unrecognizable, filled with confusion and fear. The serene atmosphere was replaced by confusion and pain. People, clung to each other, seeking comfort in the midst of devastation, their prayers now cries for help. The force of the explosion left many wounded, some buried under rubble. Emergency workers rushed in, risking their own safety to pull survivors from the wreckage. In the aftermath, survivors scrambled for safety, calling out for family and friends. The search for loved ones became frantic, every second filled with dread and hope. The moment of terror was brief, but its impact would last a lifetime. The trauma etched itself into the hearts of all who survived, leaving scars that would never fully heal. The mosque, once a sanctuary, was now a scene of devastation, a painful reminder of how quickly peace can be shattered by violence. As the dust settled, the true scale of the tragedy became heartbreakingly clear. The once peaceful mosque, a place of worship and community, now stood in ruins, its walls scarred and its spirit shaken. The mosque was now a scene of carnage, prayer carpets stained with blood, the air thick with the acrid smell of explosives and dust. Shattered glass and splintered wood littered the floor, a stark reminder of the violence that had erupted within these sacred walls. At least 31 people lost their lives, and nearly 170 were injured. Families searched desperately for loved ones, their cries echoing through the chaos. Survivors, many wounded themselves, tried to help others, lifting rubble and carrying the injured outside. Strangers became rescuers, united by shock and grief as they worked together to save as many as they could. Emergency services arrived to chaos, overwhelmed by the sheer number of casualties. Paramedics and volunteers moved quickly, but the devastation was immense. Ambulances raced through the city, sirens wailing into the night as hospitals filled with the wounded. Medical staff worked tirelessly, treating injuries and comforting the terrified. First responders made agonizing choices about who to help first, forced to triage in the midst of confusion and heartbreak. The grim task of recovering bodies began as news of the attack spread rapidly, drawing crowds of anxious relatives and reporters to the scene. The attack's planning was evident: gunfire to create panic, then the devastating blast that tore through the congregation. Forensic teams and security forces combed through the wreckage, searching for answers. The aftermath was not just physical destruction, but deep psychological trauma for the community. Grief and fear lingered as people tried to process the horror they had witnessed. The mosque became a memorial to a terrible loss, a place where prayers for peace now mingled with tears for the fallen. The attack sent shockwaves through Islamabad, a city that prided itself on security and calm. Residents reacted with disbelief and horror. Such brutality during Friday prayers was unimaginable. The bombing shattered the city's sense of safety, especially because a mosque is sacred to all Pakistanis. The attack was seen as a deep sacrilege, uniting people in condemnation and sorrow. The city's usual bustle gave way to a somber silence, sirens echoing through the streets. News channels broadcasted the tragedy into every home, families anxiously awaiting updates. The randomness and cruelty of the violence left people feeling vulnerable and afraid. Parents worried for their children. Public spaces suddenly felt dangerous. The loss was not just of life, but of innocence and security. Islamabad was a community in mourning, struggling to comprehend the hatred in their midst. In the wake of the attack, Islamabad's emergency systems mobilized instantly. Authorities declared a state of emergency, securing the mosque and coordinating rescue efforts. Hospitals were placed on high alert, medical staff rushing in to treat the wounded. The influx of victims strained resources, prompting urgent appeals for blood donations. Citizens responded with compassion. Lines formed at donation centers. Volunteers flocked to hospitals. The tragedy united people from all backgrounds, showing resilience in the face of terror. Social media was flooded with messages of support and offers of help. The community rallied, providing food, water, and comfort to families in need. Instead of division, the attack inspired solidarity and kindness. Even in darkness, the spirit of Islamabad shone through. The bombing was part of a long, painful history of sectarian violence in Pakistan, where Shia Muslims are often targeted. Shias, a significant minority, have faced persecution from extremist groups for decades. Attacks on mosques and religious gatherings are meant to terrorize and demoralize the community. These acts are often timed with important religious observances, maximizing fear and casualties. Militant groups exploit instability to carry out their deadly campaigns, deepening sectarian divides. Thousands of Shia Muslims have lost their lives in this ongoing campaign of violence. For the Shia community, constant threats turn daily life into a struggle for survival. Mosques become fortified, and children grow up knowing their faith makes them targets. The psychological toll is immense. Trauma, anxiety, and grief haunt families. Sectarian violence erodes trust and unity, fraying the fabric of Pakistani society. While most Pakistanis reject extremism, persistent attacks breed suspicion and fear. The violence damages the nation's reputation and diverts resources from progress. The scars are emotional, social, economic, and political. A few extremists hold the entire nation hostage, hindering peace and prosperity. Behind the numbers are real people, families shattered, futures lost. Each victim had hopes, dreams, and loved ones left to grieve. The injured face long recoveries, some with permanent disabilities and deep trauma. Survivors struggle with fear and PTSD, their lives forever changed. The tragedy ripples through families and communities, causing grief and financial hardship. Hatred reduces people to labels, erasing their humanity. The attack was not a political act, but pure hate with devastating consequence. Understanding the human cost is essential to fighting the ideology that fuels such violence. In the aftermath, the resilience of Islamabad's people shone through. The community's response, donating blood, volunteering, sharing grief, proved hate would not win. Moving forward requires unity, rejecting extremism, and building bridges of understanding. Leaders and citizens alike must work for peace, teaching tolerance and fostering dialogue. Hope is found in acts of kindness and solidarity, in prayers for peace across all faiths. These actions are the foundation of a more inclusive society. The memory of the victims must inspire lasting change and a commitment to peace. Through unity and resilience there is hope that such tragedy will never be repeated.